Just for the space.
It's a nice park.
Yeah, it is. I like it there too. Are we ready?
Oh.
We're on. Okay, well, I'm excited this morning to be with Jennifer Henry of Core Resolution Systems. She's here to tell us a little bit about herself and about her wonderful new company.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, how were things for you back in the day? Let's get right back to it.
Okay, so, we had been talking, you and I have been swapping stories. And so I know that you wanted me to share a little bit about kind of where I came from and why I even started Core Resolution Systems, like what it is that I went through growing up and, through young adulthood to get to the point where I wanted and needed to become a life coach. And
you were telling me a little bit yesterday about your early childhood,
and
how...
It was interesting. I'm an only child.
Yeah.
I have both of my parents. I grew up on a horse ranch on an acre and a half of dirt, and I never knew to need, let alone want. I also never really heard the word no. And I never really knew significant consequences to my actions because I was pretty much able to do whatever I wanted. And it's interesting, I look back and I had loving parents, I do, but we've all got issues, right? And my parents were such extremely different people. One being this strong, alpha, dominant, powerful male, and then my mom, who was this very submissive, very quiet, very speak when spoken to kind of woman. And I was this little powerhouse with this mouth on me. And, she's like, we used to get along so well. And I was like, Mom, what happened? And she said, you learned how to talk, right? And I just took over the house. And she didn't really know how to deal with that or contain that. And so I wasn't contained. And I'm not saying that I think children should be necessarily contained, but rallied in, guided,
right,
like shuffled through the madness at some points, right? Not just free will run rampant. And so by 13, I was every day using marijuana. I was partying at 14 with Coke. I remember going to Midwinter Dance and scoring an 8-ball of Coke, and then wanting to go score again at 14, 15 years old. Doing ecstasy and acid. And by the time I was 16, I was introduced to methamphetamines. And when you're someone I was an only child, and I was outgoing and lively and like so unconditionally loving and wanted to give you everything because that's how I was loved, was I was given everything. And I was told yes, and so if you asked me something, then I said yes. And I made a lot of interesting friends that way. And when I started to get into the life of drugs, I made even more interesting friends that way. And I was whatever you wanted me to be, as long as you liked me, as long as you would be my friend. And it was so detrimental. Not knowing who I was, not knowing what I was about, not knowing what I liked or didn't like, not being able to really tune in and listen to my gut because I didn't trust it. Because what if so-and-so didn't agree? Anybody.
Sure.
And so by 16, I was injecting methamphetamine. And I was an IV user. And I was kicked out of my home because my parents had to save themselves. They could not, at that point, there finally was consequences to my actions, but it was a little late in the game, and I thought that just meant they didn't love me. And I thought that meant that, I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that my world was not okay anymore.
So you were out of the house at age 16.
16, I was, and it wasn't their fault. I don't blame them in the least. It was the best thing they ever did because I couldn't continue to live under their roof and not abide by their rules. That's not fair. That's not life. Right? And so I was using drugs, and so I was not allowed in their home fairly. And it was the hardest thing they'd ever done, but it was the best thing. It was the best thing they could have ever done because I had to start making my own decisions. If I was going to be doing that, then that was on me. It was, no matter what. And so, long story, fast forward, I was homeless. If you wanted me to get a little bit raw, so it's going to go R-rated for sure, real quick.
Tell us.
Plug your kids' ears if you don't want them to hear the truth. But, I was gang raped, and I was left for dead, and I was held hostage for days because the dope dealer wanted to blame me on the fact that he went and smoked all the dope, you know, and I was a good person. I just wanted to get high. And unfortunately, they saw that for the weakness that it was. And I was, just put through the hamster wheel, or what, I don't even know what, I'm trying to clean it up. But I mean, it was just really, really an ugly time for me.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
I don't know. I know it sounds super crazy, and but I'm so grateful for it.
Right.
Because I am who I am today because of it. And I stand for the things that I stand for, and I have the opinions that I have because of the fact that I was able to survive these things.
Yeah.
And so...
Sure, and sometimes the things that we think are going to kill us, the things that we think we can't possibly survive, those are actually the catalysts to move us into where we're supposed to be. Absolutely. And doing the work that we're supposed to do. So I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm so thrilled that you're here doing the work that you're doing now.
And so I was out of my mind crazy, and I'd been picked up multiple times for a 5150. I ended up doing a 5250 stay, which is just a longer stay than a 5150.
Sure.
They don't even have those really anymore, I don't think. They're very rare, aren't they? Like
they do have them, but it is rare.
I mean
it's a 2-week hold, so...
Right.
Yeah, you have to pretty seriously want to kill yourself to land on a 2-week
You have
hold.
to be completely out of your mind.
Yeah.
And
Gravely
I was
disabled.
completely out of my mind. And that is where, you know, they diagnosed me paranoid schizophrenic, and
Did
they had me on 1,500 milligrams of Depakote, and my hair was falling out in handfuls, and I was, you know, doing everything I could to put on the face and be the girl that they wanted me to be, so I get the heck out of there.
Right.
You know, and they're like, oh, she's too happy. She's too happy. I'm like, no, I'm putting on a face. Can you just let me out? Like, I'll be whatever you want me to be. Just let me out. And so I was still crazy when they had set me free, and I didn't even my mom came to pick me up. She begged them not to, and I don't remember this at all. She reminds me she's told me this story, but she says, you know, I begged them not to let you out. I knew that you weren't ready. I could see the crazy in your eyes still.
Wow.
And I got in the car with her, and I didn't even make it home. I had jumped out of the car. And so the parents are out there right now, and they're like, what do I do? Unfortunately, I'm sorry for you, because the law right now is allowing your child to be out on the street because of Prop 47 and 57 and AB 109 and all these things that are in place right now under Gavin Newsom. These things are misdemeanors, and it's okay to be a risk to yourself and others out there on the street right now. But thank God, when it was me, it was against the law to be a risk to yourself and others, and you did get there were mental hospital facilities that I could go to and be rescued from myself, because I was not in a bright mind and I wasn't going to choose life.
Sure. Just so everybody knows, if you ever are in a desperate situation like that, all you have to do is call the police and tell them that you want to kill yourself, and they'll take care of you right away.
There you go. Then
that's
do
all
it.
you have to do.
But you have to be willing, you know, to
you do
make
have
that
to
phone
be
call.
Yes. Absolutely.
And that's where you have to be willing, and that's what it all comes to. So, you know, fast forward, I was, you know, so I got picked up at 18 years old a couple times, ended up going to inpatient rehab, finally suffered consequences long enough to get away from it and to be sober for 4 years.
So were you in a long inpatient or outpatient treatment?
Honestly, I was supposed to do 90 days. I met a boy. I lasted 67 days, and we both got kicked out.
Oh, okay.
And
fraternizing.
Fraternizing, exactly. Cedar House, actually.
Okay.
And so thank goodness, for some reason, the judge, the terms of at the time it was Prop 36.
Yeah.
And the judge had seen it as time served, because I at least did 60 days. So I was able to go, but this is the interesting part, and God, I feel like the universe is interesting in this way, but he ended up that not being sufficient, and so he had to go to Whiteside. And so Whiteside was going to all these meetings, and that was the only way that I could see him. So I started going to meetings because I wanted to go see this boy, and it stuck. And so that's where I met Kimberly, and I met Catherine, and I met all these women that really actually had the program and were working the steps and were working the program. They weren't just going to meetings to socialize and smoke cigarettes and drink coffee.
And be a hypocrite.
Right. And sleep with everybody's husbands. They were
trying to change their
lives.
lives.
They were changing their lives.
Right?
And it was ugly, but it was happening, you know?
Yeah.
And I loved that. And that I picked up on that. But the problem was I still had no faith in anything. And so I was still blindly following. I still wasn't learning. No one had taught me how to trust my gut. In the program, everybody tells me that I can't trust my gut. And so I've learned as a coach that is the furthest thing from the truth, and that the whole reason that I'm running is because I'm not listening to my gut.
Agreed.
So that is where I differ.
We have to listen to that small, still voice inside. It informs us.
You have to find that voice and be able to differentiate between that and the rest of the committee in your head.
Sure.
And so that is something that no one helped me do in the program, in the meetings, in the rooms. And so when it was 4 years later and I was engaged to be married with this guy, I'd been with him forever, helping him raise his child, and he relapsed. And I lasted through that, and I kicked him out, and I was good, and I was still clinching on with bare white knuckles.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to get right, and he called me, and I went and picked him up, and I put him through detox, and we were moving back in together. And the first night we were back together, she found out she was pregnant. The girl he had cheated on me with while he was out there, that I didn't care about because I'd kicked him out, was pregnant. And so she was leaving her husband to be with him, but he didn't want to be with her, all this drama. And it was one of the first times in my life that I actually realized, like, this isn't what I want. I don't want to be a part of any of this. Like, and I left. Unfortunately, I didn't I didn't have that connection to anything greater than myself, really, when it came down to it, and no one was around. And I went back out because I didn't know, I still had never really learned how to cope. I had never learned how to turn into self and figure out, okay, what do I want now?
Yeah, I mean, 12-step programs are really good for self-awareness and getting understanding and moving through some things. But with regards to giving you an action plan to do after you've discovered this information, not so good.
Right.
We got to come up with that on our own.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, luckily, I don't know if luckily I had got to experience the streets again in a different perspective. This time I was not going to be the victim.
Okay.
And so I was running with people and doing things that I'm definitely not proud of. And I ended up but because, in all fairness, again, people pleasing, I ended up doing 2 prison terms for other people. And I'm sure there's all kinds of people who are like, I didn't do it. Oh, I was totally doing the stuff. Okay. I was doing the drugs, I was stealing, I was robbing people, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But when we got in trouble, I was not doing any of that. And I was in my room just getting high, because that's really what I love to do, was seclude and be numb and be numb, gone, non-existent.
Sure.
It was like suicide on the installment plan.
No, I understand that completely.
Because I didn't know how to live, but I didn't know how to kill myself.
Yeah. Did you ever see that movie with David Duchovny where he plays a doctor that is a drug addict and he loses his license and has to go to work for the mob?
No.
There's a line in that movie where he's talking about his addiction, and he said that numb was good, but unconscious was better. And I identified with that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's.
It's like we were talking about the other day. We're looking for an escape from ourself, looking for disconnection from self.
Absolutely.
So you were all in the middle of that disconnection back then too.
And that's where it really started. I had my first introduction to faith while I was locked up this very last time when I was arrested and first in jail. I actually took drugs in with me. And I had my rig, which is a needle, a hypodermic needle, and I had about an 8-ball of dope, of speed. And I knew that I wasn't getting in trouble for my own stuff because I had my own stuff packed away. And but so that set me up. So when that happens, because it does happen, there are drugs and alcohol and all kinds of fun things going on in prison.
Yeah.
And so you don't really get away from the life by getting locked up. You actually get wrapped up in it even tighter, and it's even more difficult to be out of it when you're inside, because
Just so important that we look for alternatives to jail and prison for people that have drug charges.
I begged. So this last time in county, I begged and I fought. And so I tell that story because I was still getting high, obviously, in prison. And I actually didn't even get clean until July 17th of 2010. And so this July, it'll have been 10 years, but I was locked up when I got clean because I tested dirty. I was getting my visits taken away, getting my boxes taken away. And it was my chance to really stop and reflect. God was like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Because you're getting out in so many days. And July, August, September, October, I was supposed to get out in 90 days. I got another 90 days added to my sentence. So I did an extra 45 because I got half time. So I was supposed to get out in September. I ended up getting out in October because of the fact that I got in this dirty test. And so it was like, hold on. It was like a check. real quick. What do you want out of this? What are you doing? Are you going to get out and do the exact same thing? Or are you going to actually take the things that have been offered to you?
Yeah.
Because when I was in county, I fought. I was like, I don't want to do this. I knew then, like, I can't keep doing this. I just need to learn how to cope with life because I have no coping skills. I have no way to connect to self. I'm so disconnected. I don't even know how to function. I need help.
So did your transformation start to take place then when you were released from prison?
It actually started beforehand.
Beforehand.
So I was doing the work beforehand, and the girls that I work with, this is a side rabbit hole, but the girls that I work with that are coming out of prison, they have to have already shown that they are making the effort, that they don't want to go back and do the same thing, that they're trying to get an education, that they're trying to up level in some way,
Sure.
shape or form.
Sure.
Because if they're not doing that, it's a lot harder to get them into that rhythm and that mindset just coming out. They need to get into it and be prepared for what's going on. And the problem is we're not asking any of them what they want. No one still was asking me what I wanted. Everyone was telling me what I needed, telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing. No one was asking me what I needed or what I wanted or what I was looking for. And when I finally started asking myself that question, that's when the healing started happening. That's when the connection started happening. That's when I realized, you know what, I probably need to get off these medications because they're keeping me from being able to answer these questions for myself. They're keeping me from being able to feel the feelings.
Talk a little bit more about that.
In my experience, when I ended up getting released because I fought so hard in county, even though I did end up still going to prison. I was able to do SAP in prison, which is a substance abuse programming. It didn't start till way later, so that was something that I think is an issue. I think the programming should start right away from the moment we walk through those doors. But that's another story.
Yeah. Another podcast for another day.
Another podcast for another day, but I did the substance abuse program while I was in prison. Because I fought while I was in county, they gave me a 90-day or a 6-month rehab, 6-month in-person, inpatient rehab to a place called New Hope for when I was released. And so even though the healing started while I was locked up, it was really when I was around, it was when I had the ability to run and didn't.
That's really a good metaphor. I mean, maybe it's not a metaphor. Maybe you're actually talking about running, literally running, but
busting out.
Yeah, but in every way.
In every way.
Yeah, in every way.
And I didn't. And I stayed and I ground my feet in and I learned and I cried and I screamed and I prayed and I laughed and I expressed and I connected to self and I learned what sad was and I learned what happy was and I learned what joy was and I learned what content was and I learned what resentment was and I learned what being frustrated or feelings being hurt and why they were hurt and learning how to identify with all those things because it was so foreign to me because I didn't want any of it.
Yeah,
it was
you've
all
been
so
covering those
uncomfortable.
feelings since you were quite a little girl. Yeah.
Being told that I was too much, being told that I was too loud, being told that I was too fast, too crazy, just too much, and then all the while feeling like I wasn't enough. Very conflicting, very confusing, and learning how to differentiate between that and where that was all coming from. And it's been a long journey. And I honestly have been self-reflecting for a long, long time since when I started doing speed, that's what started happening was I started tuning in and when I was coming down off of the drugs, that's when I would be so introspected, inner-reflected that I needed more drugs because all of a sudden now I'm like stuck in my head and I'm stuck in self. And so now the only thing that is okay is when I'm totally loaded. So it was this vicious cycle. And it's a cycle that continues till today, I will say. When they say you're always in recovery, they're absolutely always in recovery because for me, I'm always going to be chemically imbalanced. And so you were saying, share that. And so I had to learn how to help myself become chemically balanced, whatever that looked like. And the more I learn how to balance. The more I learn about balancing my nervous system, my digestive system, my cognitive abilities.
Actual activities, physical activities. You're talking about diet, nutrition. I mean, you're talking about specific things that you're doing to change the chemicals in your brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so much science, if you start to look for it, around movement and cognitive health.
And for you, that was the ticket.
That was
right?
the ticket. So I was on all
Fitness.
kinds of psych meds. We'll just call it what it is.
Okay.
I was on all kinds of psych meds. And for me, that kept me disconnected. It kept me numb. And when I'm trying to learn how to feel, I can't be numb when I'm trying to learn how to feel. I have to be able to identify those feelings.
Understood.
So when I started to wean myself off of my meds, if that's something you guys are thinking about, just a PSA, like if that's something you're thinking about, it's something you need to discuss with your doctor. It's something that you need to discuss with maybe multiple doctors, because maybe the one doctor doesn't necessarily know or have the best advice, especially if they're getting paid by Big Pharma to push a med. And I'm just going to be honest about that.
Second opinions are always great.
Second and third opinions are always great. I would always recommend going to a functional medicine doctor, someone who has gone above and beyond medical school.
Looking forward to having a functional medicine doctor on our podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we can get a functional medicine doctor that there's a few actually that we're in connection with. So very excited about that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to pick their brains. But that...
So movement.
Yes. So balancing the gut. So the gut is our second brain. So there's hundreds of millions of neurotransmitters in our gut.
There's so much fascinating research on this right now.
Oh,
if anybody's interested in reading up on it.
Yeah. And so with the gut biome, when that's out of balance, there's something called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve communicates directly from our gut to our brain. And so when there's heavy mucus or phlegm in our gut, or because of inflammation from inflammatory foods like gluten, dairy, sugar, okay? Those are the main, gluten, dairy, soy, sugar. Those are going to be some of the main ones. It's going to tell our brain we're not okay, because those neurotransmitters that are trying to secrete serotonin, all of our happy juices, right? There's going to be an imbalance there because they're not going to be able to secrete as much, if any, right?
So for you, brain health started with gut health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, brain
cool.
health first for me started with movement and activity.
Okay.
Because I had to change my state to change my state of mind.
Yeah. Change my state to change my state of mind.
And when I started doing that, I started realizing how much better I felt. And when I started getting a hold of how much better I felt, I started looking for more ways to do that. Because like any good addict, I want more.
Sure.
And so now I want more connection. I want more good feeling. I want more serotonin naturally. I want more dopamine naturally. I want to be able to, I want more of that. I want more joy. I want more contentedness. I want more spiritual connection. I want
and
more.
of course, that's a topic for another day too, which I'm excited about. Yeah.
So, I mean,
so you get to a certain point in your life, and you go to college, and you get your hairdressing license.
So I actually got my license. So when I got clean at 18, I immediately went back to school, and I got my cosmetology license, and so that has carried me. I was fortunate enough. My grandmother had left me some bonds, so I had $1,500 in bonds, which wasn't a lot, but it was everything to me, because it was the I only needed $1,750 to get my whole kit for school and tuition and stuff like that. So even though it seemed like $1 million at the time, like I was able to cash those out, and they were something that I'd had luckily. So grandparents, just a little tip, when they're babies, and that saved me. And so that carried me through, even when I was in prison from 22 to 25, I was in prison twice. I was in prison, got out 67 days later, went back because I didn't know how to do life. And so when I got out of prison and I went into rehab, I had 6 months to really focus on myself and really dedicate my life to myself and myself only, and to figure out what boundaries were and learn how to find a balance. And so that's what I do today. The next 10 years I spent every single day, and it wasn't always perfect. And one of my favorite things to say now, and I heard it from someone else, but better done than perfect. And as long as I just keep taking the next right indicated step, and I keep checking in every single day with self, I learn what my best balance looks like.
Yeah.
And I've now learned what boundaries are and how to implement them to keep that balance.
One thing I've noticed about you is you also know the things that you need to do to stay above that line, right? You know you have to spend a certain amount of time in the gym. You know you have to eat a certain way. You know you need enough nutrition. But
knowing and doing are two different things. So I definitely am human, right? And I have my days where I'm binging on a box of Cheez-Its. And so guess what I'm going to feel like the next day? And so what I've learned to do is get really curious. Like, okay, instead of like judgmental, like, God, you fat cow, you're so gross. Like, because that's immediately where we go.
Sure.
Like, how dare you? Like, hold on a second. Just slow the back, what was the intention? What were you looking for in that bottom of the box of Cheez-Its? Right? What were you seeking? Were you just trying to disconnect and numb and get some comfort? Was there something needing to be nourished? Did you not eat enough carbs that day? Did you not get enough sodium in that day?
Maybe it just tasted good and you wanted to treat yourself.
And so that's where nourishing, right, So how else could I have treated myself, right? And get curious about that. So
Oh,
when I
that's a good
go
point.
to have the box of Cheez-Its next time, what can I do instead? Maybe if I'm looking for that comfort and that nourishment or that checking out, maybe I can go make a hot cup of tea and curl up with a blanket and a good book
You know,
or
that self-soothing,
journal.
that self-soothing is so important because so many of us don't have that skill. And we look for things outside ourselves
Oh,
to
we have
comfort
that
and
skill.
soothe
We have the
ourselves.
skill. The methods are just messed up.
Well, you know what I mean.
But that's exactly
the skill,
right.
if the skill is to go to a drug or a drink or a person or food or whatever, that's not so much a skill, right?
Well, so here's how I look at it. It's a method.
Sure, it's a method.
It's a method. And you can get skilled at a method. And if you've gotten skilled at a method of numbing by using drugs and alcohol, then you're skilled at that method. And it's going to take a little bit of time to skill yourself at a different method. Because we're going to have to go through the process of like talking to the part of you and getting to know the part of you that is going for that. Right? And so if we're looking to the part of you, the hurt little girl, the cheated on wife, the whatever. We have to be able to communicate with that part of ourselves and get connected to that part of ourselves to listen to what the need actually is. What is the need? What is the intention behind the drug? What is the intention behind the alcohol? What is the intention behind the random sex with a stranger? What is the intention behind the box of Cheez-Its? It's all the same thing, just different methods. The intention may be the same for all of it. We just haven't found a method that works
At some point, you
self.
started, comforting yourself through bodybuilding. Is that a good way to? Is that a
So
good
I
term
think
to
it was
use?
I felt so, when I started lifting, one, it was increasing my serotonin levels. Two, I was building actual physical strength. And because I was building muscle, the more muscle you have, the more energy you have in your body. Because the more ATP, adenosine
Right.
triphosphate, Google it, the more ATP you have. So therefore, you have more energy and you are more lively and you are capable of doing more.
Right.
Actually, it's science.
Right.
So it's, the act plus being able to how do I explain it? When you're under the bar or you're under the squat rack or you're running or you're doing something and you honestly feel like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Like, I can't do this. What am I doing? And then you keep going and you don't die. That rush, that like, oh,
It is
what
a
just
rush.
happened?
It is a
I
rush.
just did that.
Right.
What up, bitch? Like, I just did that.
Yeah, see,
it's
we
a
were-
different kind of strong, and that's a tagline I've used for the last 10 years. It's
different
a
kind of
different
strong?
kind of strong. Because it's
Right.
not just about the muscles. It's not just about how much you can lift. It's about what do you actually think you're capable of doing, and then pushing past that.
Right. Now, we were talking about that earlier today because, I haven't been well for a very long period of time and in bed for a long time. And my body's kind of weak, and I set out to walk Mount Rubidoux. And what I really thought was I would get out of my car from the parking lot, I would walk to the base of Mount Rubidoux, and that would be it. I'd go home, right? But when I got to the base of Mount Rubidoux, I thought, that wasn't so hard. Let me just keep going. And so I made it all the way to the top that day.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I
it brings
know,
me to tears
right?
every time
Right?
you say it because I know your struggle.
This is
and
huge for
to hear
me.
this for you. And so what happened? Yes. So how many?
And so what happened yesterday was that I said to myself, oh, I wonder if I can walk the mountain without stopping. So I walked to the top of Mount Rubidoux without stopping. I did walk very slowly when I needed to rest, but I kept moving. I just told myself, keep moving, keep
Just
moving.
kept moving.
And by the time I got to the top, I was ready to do cartwheels. I was so excited with myself. And all the way down, it was like such a feeling of accomplishment. And I know for some people, they're not going to understand. But for me, after spending months and even years in bed, to be able to get to the top of the mountain, not once, but 3 times now, and I'm going to go again today, that's huge. So I can identify with your story there. Yeah, absolutely.
It's exactly what I
so
want
the
for my
fitness
clients.
was really, really like appealing to you, attractive to you.
Yeah, and because in the beginning, again, that's just what, I would get on that treadmill in the rec room. I was detoxing off of my meds while I was in rehab.
Sure.
And so I was in a house with 60 women and 11 children. And I don't have kids. And there was mandatory babysitting
Yeah.
for like a certain portion every week. Everybody got different chores. Anyway, and I'm coming off of meds. And so I was still having to program every day from 9 to 5. Classes and groups
Sure.
and one-on-ones and all the things. And so at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. I'm physically in pain. I was completely insane. And the only thing I could think to do, because I was coming out of my skin, was move my body. And so by doing that, it actually helped me secrete more serotonin and dopamine to help up those chemicals in my brain and in my body, and now I'm learning in my gut, because when we take artificial medicines, right? When we take chemically made or artificially made serotonin, right? Or any kind of medication that our body is supposed to naturally produce, what happens is that our body stops producing it, at least in the amount that it's supposed to, because we're telling our body, don't worry, I got it. So for example, even if someone were to take growth hormone, even though we start losing our growth hormone from 35 on, like we start depleting, which is why we start wrinkling, we start getting more achy, we don't heal as quickly, all these things start happening. If we start taking it, then we're telling our pituitary gland, don't worry, I got it. And the little bit that you were producing stops.
Well, fortunately, there are some medicines that work to assist the organs to naturally produce.
So those are going to be, absolutely. And so you're going to want to do your homework. Don't take
anybody's word for it.
Yeah. So make sure you pay attention to which is going to be a precursor, which is going to assist your body or your brain in producing certain chemicals. Like, for example, you can take a precursor for growth hormone, which will help assist your pituitary gland in producing more growth hormones. So there are things out there like that. Some are still in research mode, but find a research scientist.
Lots of new stuff coming out all the time.
Absolutely. Too. And so do your homework. That's all I'm saying. But there are definitely ways, 100%, that you can physically increase these chemicals and balance these chemicals, and that you can do by eating. And even they're even finding out now through mindset and self-talk.
Oh, yeah, 100%. But you took it a step further. You went into competition.
I did. Well, I'm an addict, right? And so I don't really do anything half-assed. Everything I do 100%. And what had happened was, it was totally by accident. I didn't even honestly know competing existed in this sense. I mean, I knew it, but I never thought someone like me would do something like that. And it wasn't quite as popular as it is now. I mean, it was 10 years ago. And so when I started getting into lifting and then I started eating clean, my body started changing as a result of me loving on it and finding what worked for me.
Right.
And so because of the things I was doing that I loved, my body looked amazing. And people would stop. And I don't
does.
Thank you. But I don't say this to brag. I'm saying this because the fact was, like, I looked incredible. And it wasn't because I gave a shit about what my body looked like. It was because I was doing the things that my body asked me to do. And I was listening to it. And I was honoring it.
And so that took you to competition.
People would stop me in the grocery store. Oh my God, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I do hair. They're like, no, that's not it. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, what do you do for this? And I was like, tricep extensions. You know, well, how do you look so good? Blah, blah. And I didn't understand. So they kept asking me if I competed. So I started Googling it. And then I had a friend that had owned this guy, Spencer. He had opened a nutrition shop, a supplement shop, 2 doors down from the salon that his mom owned, that he also worked in, that I worked in.
Okay.
And so while I was waiting for clients, when I was just getting back, I had just gotten out of prison. I was just, really starting to build my hair clientele again. So I had to sit every day, all day, and wait for walk-ins. And so I would go and hang out at the supplement shop, and I would ask questions, and I would pick his brain. And he had this little program he was playing around with, and so I was like, well, put in my calories, see what I would really need if I was gonna try and build muscle and burn all my fat and get low body fat. And so I was eating 6 ounces of sweet potatoes every meal, and 4 ounces of chicken, and all the green beans, and all the and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I'm shredded, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do a show. And I picked a show 8 weeks out. And I did it, and it was horrible. And I learned, it wasn't horrible as far as, it was horrible. There were so many things that were horrible about it. I had terrible social anxiety, and that's something,
that's
right?
worst.
So when I got out of rehab, I remember driving to the grocery store, and I would pull up, and I would sit in the parking lot, and I would try and breathe, and I would, try and talk myself into getting out of the car and going in the grocery store. And it just didn't happen. And I would turn around and I would drive home. And it would take a couple times. And it happened for months. And it was just one of those things I kept having to stretch my boundaries. I had to keep stretching so I could feel that growth. And growing pains hurt, right?
Sure
They're
does.
uncomfortable. And,
even good change is uncomfortable.
all change is uncomfortable.
It's just uncomfortable.
Yes.
For
me,
change
anyway.
at my age, change is the name of the game, though. So
Well,
I'm trying
at my
really
age-
hard at being flexible and willing to accept changes as they come. It's not easy.
I'm a true believer that how you do one thing is how you do everything. And that's why I feel like I had to do something to continue to, if I can do this, now I can do this. And if I can do this, now I can do this. If I can do this, now I can do this. And what I really wanted when I started competing was I saw it as an opportunity because of the attention I was getting from doing it and sharing it on social media. I thought, oh my God, I can build a platform with this. I can build a platform that people will listen, they will understand. Like whatever you're going through right now, it doesn't have to be like that. Like I promise you, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be better.
So that is your platform. Life doesn't have to suck.
It doesn't have to suck. Like embrace the
Life
suck.
doesn't have to suck.
Like push past the suck. Like if
Yeah.
you really think it sucked, like let me give you something to cry about. Isn't that the kind of saying, right?
Sure.
Like find a reason to actually have passion for something. Find a reason to actually get up in the morning. Find a reason
Instead
to
of looking for reasons why you can't do something, look for reasons why you can.
Yeah, and even if you think you can't, do it anyway and figure out what the real boundary is.
Allow yourself to fail.
Absolutely.
It's the best teacher in the world.
Absolutely. So, I mean, definitely getting all off track down rabbit holes, but
Well, in any case, if you took this experience with fitness and competing and you opened up Core Resolution Systems because you wanted other people to have this miraculous transformation in their life that you'd had.
So, I guess we will step back a minute because actually, Core Resolution Systems started because I quit competing because it destroyed me.
Oh.
So all of a sudden, what happened was I was competing and I ended up doing I think 15 shows.
Wow.
And all different federations, some for fun, some for serious. I did some photo shoots around some of it. I did them because of opportunities to do photo shoots because it was an opportunity, like I would be super lean during those times. But what had happened was I was in between categories. I was too muscular for bikini and I would get too lean for bikini with too much muscle. And then I was too small for figure. And while I was willing to mess around with certain supplements, I wasn't willing to mess around with others. And I kept comparing myself to women who were willing. And do you follow?
Oh, completely.
And while
They're getting a little help.
excuse me. And I'm not, I play around with things like SARMs and different things just because I am a science geek and I do think it's amazing some of the things they're doing with peptides and different things. But I never really wanted to mess around with my hormones. It always scared me because I saw what it can do to some women.
Oh, yeah.
And that wasn't the look I was going for. And while I do definitely appreciate all of the hard work it takes to put on all of that muscle, I didn't want to have the upper body of a figure girl. And so I realized that this wasn't for me. I was miserable. I had started hating going to the gym. I was comparing myself to everyone else. I was judging myself. I was so strict with my calories. I would look at people like they were disgusting if they were eating Oreos. I mean, I was just so off mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I was so off. And so I had to quit. I had to stop. And I realized that I didn't want to personal train anymore. People were coming to me to compete and I was turning them away from it because I was like, no, it'll destroy you. Everybody I know that competes, unless they do it for the long haul, they're miserable and they put on all this weight and they hate themselves and they're judging themselves and no, I don't want to do it. And I would turn them away. And I realized, I can't be doing this if it's not something I believe in. And so I stopped. And that's when I went back to school because I realized, it has nothing to do with just the gym. The gym is such a small part of it. Just like people who are in AA or NA, right? It's just a small part of it. It's just part of the process. Like it's all about being mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually balanced. And what does that look like when I'm healthy in every area of my life? When I have time for my social life and my friends, when I have time for self-care and relaxation and I'm not cramming everything into all of it. Yeah, exactly.
When was the last time you had fun?
Oh, before I got sick.
Okay. So just
I have fun
weeks
on
ago.
a regular. Yeah, I do have
Good.
fun. I
Good.
enjoy myself. I create space in my day for me. I create space in my day for disconnection.
That's so important for us to do, and a lot of people can't do it.
Well, it's something I've had to become the master of is my schedule.
We're
My
not
schedule-
accustomed to putting ourselves first.
And when I
Yeah.
say balance, I mean in my schedule as well as everything else, right? Because I need to make sure that I'm a priority in my own life, because if my cup isn't full, how am I going to help fill someone else's cup?
Well, you have an amazing and inspirational story, and I'm looking forward to coming back and learning more about core resolution systems.
Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was fun. All right,
I
thanks
definitely
so
enjoyed
much.
it. Thanks, guys.